Yeah.
Good morning, Joe Tolle. How are you?
Good morning, Lenny. How are you?
Good, good. Welcome to the morning show. Hey, we need to thank Elka Suspension for always being there for us and all the things they do for the ATV industry, whether you're driving your UTV, your truck, or your ATV. Elka Suspension's got the shocks for you. So make sure you check out your local dealer. You can go direct to Elka. There's so many options for you to get yourself a set of Elka shocks. And look, they're leading in every major series I'm aware of in ATV racing at this given moment. Antelope Slot Canyon tours. If you're on vacation in Arizona, you definitely got to book a tour and go check out the canyons in Arizona. They're pretty awesome. Joe, how are you on this fine day?
I'm good. I'm a little sore, but that's okay. Means I did something yesterday.
I mean, you get when you get beat up by young guys, that happens.
Yeah, yeah, that does. It's all right. It's how you stay young.
Well, exercise is a way to keep us young and healthy. And I hope that all the ATV guys are out there doing their stuff with whatever type of training they're doing because, some of these weeks off, they get complacent and don't put in enough training, and that can be an issue for them. So,
Oh, even if you're not a racer and you ride four wheelers, working out is good.
yes. Well,
Less, more control, less fatigue, less soreness the day after. And if you hit the ground, which can happen if you push the limits, you're less likely to get injured if your body's strong. So, uh, go to the gym.
exactly. Exactly. Or whatever kind of training you do it because it's always going to benefit your heart, your longevity of life, everything. But there's some unusual news that I didn't catch. I actually heard about this on a news station, and I didn't really catch what it was until I read Jeff Henson's article that came out in Dirt Wheels. And it's talking about the federal crackdown on California resources boards and California's um, Clean Air Act that restricts things further than the EPA. When the EPA makes a ruling, it's a federal ruling, and then California and a couple other states take it even farther with their own options to shut down the emissions for off-road vehicles, trucks, motorhomes, multiple different things so that you don't see some of your normal devices tools that you might use that are carbureted or use gas. You may have to go to an electric. So these are things that the new administration has signed an executive order getting rid of these mandates.
Well, and let's talk, how has that affected us specifically in the power sports industry? Well, you haven't been able to buy a YFZ 450 in California now for three to 5 years. I'm not sure of the number, but it's been a few.
Yep, 3 years. And you can't buy a Honda 4x4.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And there's a couple other models that you can't buy in California because they're restricted. And it cuts down on you being able to sell parts. You're not allowed two strokes, not allowed to have a two stroke. Can't sell a two stroke ATV. The motorcycles have gotten through somehow, but in ATV, you can't do it.
I
So,
don't I don't think you can sell a two-stroke ATV nationally. I don't think it's just California. I'm not sure on
uh,
that.
I'm not sure exactly either. I was trying to get schooled on some of the regulations, but it is a deep, deep read. And, this poor guy doesn't read that fast. So it takes me days to do the research on it. Um, these restrictions are not gone yet. They are in court already fighting it. California is saying that the federal government has no ability to stop their restrictions. Um, the feds say that they do because they're overreaching and killing industry. In Indiana, the RV industry it shuts down or destroys a $22 billion RV industry. So what do you think it's doing to the ATV industry? Slowing down the production of sport quads and then restriction Californians
Yeah,
to
you
not being able to get anything but a 700.
yeah, and you watch like these rich bureaucrats, these rich people in the government, they might restrict your RV, they might restrict your car, they might restrict your two-stroke, but they're never going to restrict their private jets. So, takes a whole lot of two-strokes to make that much pollution.
It does. And you know what? You realistically look at what they're deeming as pollution. It's carbon-based exhaust that in most cases plant life eat to build oxygen. So as they kill the trees with their restrictions, they're just killing the oxygen to kill off the humans, and the other animals that breathe air. So there's a whole lot more deeper into it. I'm not a scientist or a guy that speaks in really technical terms. So some of the language is a little different than you would see when you read these legal documents. But I can tell you this, California Air Resources Board or the EPA, nobody voted them in. The EPA was an executive order, and I don't know how the California Air Resources Board came in, but it was just mandated by the California government.
Well, and I'm not going to totally throw the EPA under the bus. I think it's like so many things in society. Things start out for a good reason to fix a problem that is a serious problem. And then inevitably, once it kind of serves its purpose and it runs its course, then it has to find something else to fight for in order to prolong its need for existence. Because, I in high school I wrote a number of papers on Aaron Brockovich and pollution and pesticides and these things being dumped into water and the effects that it has, and the chemicals that go into streams from mining that destroy fish populations and wipe out entire species. We can't pretend like we can't destroy this place, like because I believe we can. But it's like, and I think, if you could get everybody in the country to stand in a group and let's, all right, if you're against pesticides being dumped in the river, raise your hand. Everybody's hands going up.
Right.
Everybody has to drink that. Are we for factories spewing toxic things being burned into the air in your neighborhood, toxins from chemical manufacturing? Like, yeah, I think we have to do things in a clean way so that we don't just give ourselves cancer and give our kids cancer and things like that. So, I'm not going to say I'm not on some level a tree hugger, because I think we should all be tree huggers on some level. But then again, we I'll say this and then I'll drop it and I won't go any further. Obviously, the Civil Rights Act was a good thing. All people have a right to vote who are legal citizens of the country. We shouldn't discriminate against people based upon, uh, you know, how they look, maybe how they behave, but we shouldn't discriminate against people based upon how they look. There was a lot of good reason for the Civil Rights Act to happen. Now it just so happens that that ran its course, and now people who still want to people are still trying to use the Civil Rights Act for things that had nothing to do with what the Civil Rights Act was all about. They found ways to perverse it and manipulate it and use it for control. And that's what the EPA has done, and more so with the California Air Research Bureau.
They're totally they've turned it into to tyrannical departments that crush businesses, and their research is biased in my opinion because just like everything the government does, they overreach. Okay, I'm
Sure.
not saying let's not make things cleaner and nicer, but we're probably the only country in the world that's doing it. Canada may do it a little bit. You might see a restriction here or there out of Mexico, and maybe some other companies in the in countries in the UK. But for the most part, they don't give a shit. They don't care. You know, we're drinking out of paper straws, and there are 5 Asian countries dumping plastics into the ocean at a higher rate than you can imagine. And I just think that we need to change some of the rules to make more sense. It's just like gas. Okay, what we're putting in our tanks is not gas. I will be freaking breaking it down
It's
and
corn.
well, it's chemicals in water and it's highly corrosive to your brass and aluminum. And if you're running pump gas in your carbureted vehicles, good luck because it's destroying them slowly.
No way. Don't do it. Don't do it. I had a Honda 250X. People have probably heard me say it once or twice, but you told me about this at one point, and then I got a Honda 250X in for testing, and we've gone to fuel injection so long ago. Like, pretty much everything was fuel injected. Well, at least it felt like to me by '09. Like here comes, you know, we Grizzly was fuel injected. Everybody else was going fuel injected. YFZ's fuel injected. Most of the quads that came out were fuel injected in the 450 class back in the day. So but anyway, I got a 250X and I put pump gas in it, and it's like a month later, it's like, why won't this thing run? Why is this brand new Honda not running? And I'm calling you up, you're like, Joe, it's your fuel. Your needle jet's probably plugged. Took it to the Honda dealer. I'm like, fix this thing. And yeah, it's because there was crap in my carburetor. Why? Gas. So yeah,
Yeah, it's a argument and a conversation that I have every day of my life. And I wish I was a chemist, maybe not a chemist, but knew more about the tables of what these chemicals are so that I could explain it in a more intelligent fashion, or be a better linguist so that I could use language that might go over some people's heads, but I just use the common sense test that I use. A little jar with pump gas in it, and it separates, and within 3 weeks, it won't burn. Okay, what is that? And then there's water floating in it. When you put real gas in a jar and leave it on the shelf for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and throw it out on the driveway, you better stand back because it is going to ignite. And these are things that we have to deal with. It doesn't affect your fuel injection systems on all of the machines that I've seen, your cars, your trucks, your ATVs, anything that uses a fuel injection system that would be in the motorsports industry. It's made out of different materials than aluminum and brass, which don't corrode. You do have some injector issues with your fuel injection stuff, but it's not because of fuel. It's usually debris that get into the tank that pass through the filtering system that clog your injectors. Um, it could be a prolonged thing with the fuel, but it's not a normal. You're not having a epidemic of injectors failing in the ATV world due to bad fuel because a lot of people want to run pump gas. And if you're running a Raptor 700, a YFZ 450, or a Can-Am, whatever, run pump gas. It's okay. As soon as you raise the compression, you better put good fuel in it. But um, at this point, you can't turn away from what's out there in the market. I just wish that we, the consumers, would stand up to the manufacturers and say, no, we want real fuel. Get these regulations out of here because regulations are actually what's killing business across the country. If you look at small businesses in America, ATV businesses especially, they're getting punished for things that only the corporations can fight off.
Well, but you're not going to go back to carburetors. I mean, that ship has sailed. So, if the ethanol fuel doesn't kill fuel injected engines, don't count on it. And I don't see them, because if you went back to, if you got rid of ethanol, which, I would like, you would like, most of us would like to burn, pure clean gas, then you're going to have corn farmers crying. Oh, we corn, we grow this corn for the engines. Now there's going to be less demand for their corn. But of course, if there's less demand for their corn, then maybe
They
they
can
can
grow
grow,
something else.
then maybe they can grow feed corn and they can feed cattle more affordably and livestock more affordably because you're not driving up the cost by using corn for gas. You're using it to feed livestock. Now all of a sudden you're going to lower food prices. So, it's all complex. It's all intertwined. I'm not in the government, although I'd probably do a better job than most of the guys that are there.
Well, yeah, most of the people in the government are a brick shy of a load or two. But
Uh,
okay, let's back to your corn fuel. So check this out. When you start your gas car, it doesn't happen with your ATVs, but when you start your gas car and that puddle of water ends up by your tailpipe while it's warming up, okay, everybody thinks, oh, it's just condensation. It's no big deal. No, that's toxic to humans. That will kill you. Okay. And
don't drink it.
that's because of the way they make the fuel. All right. They don't tell you these things. They don't advertise this, you know, because they're scared. Same like the semi trucks, the diesel engine, the big powered trucks that deliver all your goods, the clean air filter system that they put on those. It was designed to catch three particles in the filter. Well, it doesn't. It catches two, and one gets put into the air. Well, the one chemical that gets put into the air is will kill humans and causes cancer. Before, it used to attach itself to one of the other products or chemicals or whatever molecules, whatever they are, and it would fall to the ground and wash away when the rains came. Okay, well, this isn't happening anymore. So, did they improve our environment? Did they improve our life? No, they put us in danger because they don't do the research to understand what they're doing. Same with cleaning the forest here in California. Oh, don't do anything. Well, then we have a wildfire and burns down the city.
Yeah, that's the state that had passed funding to build reservoirs that never built reservoirs because they were worried about a smelt or something. I don't know.
No, they did. They got rid of two dams. They blew up two dams not long before the freaking LA fires. Can you believe that? And all the reservoirs were dry because the person in charge of it didn't do their job.
Well, and then the other ones that were funded to be built were never built.
Correct. Correct. I mean, and oh, you're not allowed to hold a government official liable for this? Well, I know in the chat we're probably not talking about ATVs, but we are talking about things that are directly affecting your industry. If you love ATVs, these are things and these are happening that directly affect you. The federal government getting involved with, tamping down the extra regulations that the California Air Resources Board or some of these other states are implying or applying will allow us to bring back some of these models into your state or allow you to, like here in California, I want to buy a chainsaw or I want to buy a gas-powered weed whacker, things like that. I'm supposed to buy an electric. Well, you know what? An electric will work great in your little 10 by 10 grass patch, but it isn't going to work on a piece of property that's 2 or 3 acres. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So if you want to get involved and start learning, we got involved in our federal elections. You need to get involved in your local elections in your local governments and find out what's going on so that you can help stem off some of this stuff and fight back because we're losing. We are really losing. And hopefully this will help us and we'll see. Nothing's going to happen immediately. I was at Yamaha dealer, North County Yamaha here in California yesterday, and I spoke to one of the managers buying a Raptor 700. So
Oh, you are.
Yes, I am.
Uh,
And
Oh,
and
we got to talk about that.
okay, we will. Well, while we were having this conversation, I believe in 21, uh, there was a vote in California all the dealerships were supposed to come in there and they were supposed to vote on a portion of this Clean Air Act that would not limit them from being able to sell parts and do some of the things that they do with these other models. And nobody told the dealers they were supposed to go, so nobody voted on it. So the state just implemented the laws.
Are these modifications? Are these like
Uh,
exhaust fuel injection modules, things
Modifications,
like that?
models that you can sell, so on and so forth. I don't know all of the details. I'm still trying to get that. I only had like 12 hours to even think of getting the research, but yeah, the poor dealers weren't even not even notified that they needed to do this. So how could they could defend themselves?
Right.
They
It's
weren't even.
convenient.
Oh yeah, nobody know. They didn't get an email, a call, a letter, nothing. So nobody showed up, and California, as usual, or the government as usual, rubber stamped it, and you're done. So there's a lot of shady things going on in California government, um, that I live in, which I guess if you watch the news at all or do podcasts or just look on YouTube or any of the internet, you see what's happening here, and it's horrible for the world. But
Well,
yes,
hopefully the exemptions from the government, if they step in and they do any kind of exemptions for industries, it's squeaky wheel's going to get the grease. If the RV industry's throwing a fit and they get an exemption and the power sports industry doesn't speak up and push for an exemption, they may not get one. So, it's like, where's their head at? And what are they worried about?
you know
So we'll see.
that one of the things that you also have to look at it. There's so many people that are scared to fight. This country was built on fighting. What are we afraid of? We're Americans. The United States of America was founded on standing up to the bullies. Why are we not standing up to the bullies now?
It's like June 14th, no King's Day. June 21st, bring back two-stroke day. Okay.
I'm in, I mean, like President Trump said, if he was a king, all the stuff that he was trying to do would already be done, and he wouldn't have to be fighting so hard to get anything to happen. So that takes your no kings rule and blows it right out of the water. But that's neither here nor there. But this is what's happening, everybody. Please pass this on. Please share this with everybody that you know in the industry because we all have to act. I believe Illinois is a state that is directly affected by this. New York is another state that's affected by it. And there's 10 or 12 others that are also doing these kind of things, like they have the California Air Resources Boards, where they're shutting down or adding emissions to it. This also uh, drastically affects EVs, where they're getting rid of the EV mandates, where in 2035, you're not going to be able to buy a gas-powered car in California. Well, they did away with that. We'll be able to buy a gas-powered car in California. So this is where we're at with it so far. I don't know if you'll see another two-stroke ATV ever come back. I really don't. I don't think so, but you never know. I mean, if things
I mean,
change,
if they do it in dirt bikes, if they can do it in a two-wheeled configuration, there's no reason they can't do it in a four-wheeled configuration. If all the manufacturers collectively demanded the right to be able to build a two-stroke four-wheeler, they might get their way, but they don't because to them, they don't see any reason to build sport quads, but KO does. So good for them, and hopefully some more people will join them. But if the manufacturers aren't on the same page demanding it, then it's unlikely that things are going to get done.
yeah, and you can trace some of our problems in the ATV world all the way back to the problems that they had in the early 80s with Honda and the ATC. They didn't stand up for the three-wheeler industry and, you know, fix the regulations on it so that the industry would be stable and the manufacturing guidelines were set. If Honda would have done all this instead of paying all those lawsuits, it'd be a totally different industry, in my opinion. But
Well,
that's you can't go back and undo the past.
I mean, Honda, I want to be very careful here, but there was, it was a different time. It was a different time. Marketing was different. Things were done different. And, if you go back to our first vintage three-wheeler test, in the very beginning of it, or maybe it was the end of it, we discussed how three-wheelers were a representation of a time when people were really stopping taking responsibility for their decisions, and they started expecting other people to be responsible for their decisions. I mean, think about it. All the centuries we rode horses, how many people were suing over their horse threw them off? Those things literally have a mind of their own. Like, you're suing the guy you bought the horse from because the horse you bought from him tossed you off. Well, that guy can't control that horse. So I think it was partly like they didn't know probably as well at the time because culturally we were shifting to just irresponsible pieces of crap, a lot of us. Just look at the TV yesterday, you'll see a lot of those people, and they don't want to take responsibility. And, so you had that. You had dealerships, you know, selling big ATVs to parents for their small kids to go ride double on knowingly. And maybe there is a little blame to go to those dealers for that. Three wheelers were marketed by some manufacturers as fun and easy to ride for the whole family. It's like, well, is that true? I don't think that's true. As a guy who rides these, who has ridden three wheelers, who owns three wheelers, they're for sale, by the way, if anybody'd like to buy one. Need a truck. So, a three wheeler is a lot harder to ride than a four wheeler. And I think a three wheeler is a lot harder to ride than a dirt bike. Now, that doesn't mean that people who want to enjoy that challenge shouldn't have the ability to do so. I think they should. But then again, I don't think that you should market them as, fun and easy to ride for the entire family. No, they're not. If you market it as, you know, um, the three-wheeled ATV, they're fun, they're challenging, but if you can master the three-wheeler, you can master off-roading, something like that. But when you say something is, when you represent it as easier than what's out there. And factually, it's not. And I'll argue with anybody about it. It's not. You're on a three wheeler, you're on the gas, it's stable. You're off the gas, it's very unstable. It's almost as stable as a quad when you're on the gas. But when you're on the brakes, it's way less stable than a quad. It's way less stable than a dirt bike because you've got one wheel in the front and two wheels in the back. And if the weight's transferred to the front and that back right tire hits something under braking, there you go. Um, Body positioning way more important. So I think there were some mistakes made in the three-wheeler era, and I wish the manufacturers would have pushed back, but I feel like on some level they maybe helped create the problem for themselves plus society, and they were just like, let's do what Suzuki's doing. So, but different time, different circumstances. Companies didn't weren't as adept to covering their butts from stupid people making stupid decisions and then wanting to make other people responsible for it because they don't have a choice. They're
Well,
crippled.
that's kind of set up a problem in this country with people that don't take accountability for themselves in so many different areas that, if you would have just stomped it out in everywhere, hey, if you're dumb and you make a mistake, I'm sorry, we're not going to pay for it. The story
Well,
of the guy with the lawnmower that turned it upside down to clean his hedges and cut part of his hand off, and then Honda had to pay the bill. I don't think that that should be going on. I'm sorry. It's just
Yeah, but okay, all right.
you opted to throw your leg over it. It's your responsibility, period.
Mm,
I don't care how it was advertised.
I do. No, you can't misrepresent things. You
I,
know,
I don't, I don't,
if Honda in a commercial said you can pick your lawnmower up and trim your hedges with it, okay, then Honda should get sued because that's not accurate. That's false. That's misleading. Um,
look, look at the
but
millions of people that went out and rode three-wheelers and the families that had no power problems. And then you take the small amount of people, and I'm not telling you that people didn't get injured, but you take the small amount of people that were either injured badly or lost their life. In the 2,500 cases that they have that went through court, it was writer error that caused the issue.
sure. And again, I'm not fighting on back. Quit, please don't keep backing me into a corner where I feel like I'm defending the government or the court system because I don't like to do either one of those. But if you don't see any dirt bike or ATV manufacturers today in any of their commercials making claims about how safe anything is, they don't. If anything, it's like always wear proper equipment, professional riders on a closed course, highly experienced riders, do not attempt. I mean, you'll see things more like that than they're safe and fun for everyone in the whole family. Put your kid on a 250R. Let's go ride. I mean, they never said that. I'm exaggerating. But, when you're making a claim that something is easy and it's not, you have misrepresented the product. And in in another life, I'll be a lawyer because I'd be damn good at it, and I'm not going to go into it, but I think the side by side market has almost gotten itself to that point of they are very vulnerable at this point with people they've worked with, influencers, things like that. They've they've been risky. And yeah, I'm not going to say anything else because I ain't trying to give anybody ideas, but when
I
you
have a whole nother line about the Polaris deal.
I
Uh,
I'm not going to go there.
no, I mean I have a whole nother deal that not very many people know about.
Okay.
They are offering a special deal for racers to buy a car for X dollars and that they control, and you show up to the races, drive the car, but have to pay the bills.
I have not heard that Polaris is offering that. I know that they'll sell you a turnkey race car for
Yeah,
140 to 150,000 dollars.
yeah,
They're
it's not you're getting in this program. You have to fill out the application, do the whole thing, and if they pick you, it's a limited supply.
sure.
They build the car, you go to the races, you do your deal, they maintain the car, you pay the maintenance bill, and you go back to the next race.
There are companies that do that outside of Polaris. It sounds like I hadn't heard about Polaris doing that, but there are companies that are out there right now, and they've existed in this. They're just now doing in side by sides what's been going on for a while in sports cars. I have my buddy Brad Didon, who's a website developer and marketing guy. Hey, if you need a website for your power sports business, Brad Didon, there you go. Free plug. But in the sports car world, which, he likes to go do track days, and there are services where if you want to go race, they build the car, same thing. And now it's in side by sides. And these companies will build a side by side for you, maintain it, bring it to the racetrack prepped, do the in-between maintenance. They set up the pits, they cook the food. You don't have to do anything. You just show up, race, go home. It's a rich man's sport. Don't get me wrong. Like if you're of average means, like you ain't in that club. But yeah, that exists. And I wasn't aware that Polaris was now going to offer it as an internal thing, but it's out there. I mean, there are companies already doing it.
Yeah, just I think it's a way to it's going to hurt a portion of the racing industry for UTVs. I mean, everything racing is expensive, regardless. I don't care where you do it, how you do it. From damaging parts to just maintaining your machines. Racing is an expensive sport, no matter what you do. The easiest way to become a millionaire, start racing with a billion. Because you'll just suck the funds right out of you. But that's just another thing that I had heard firsthand from somebody that is involved in the program. So it's uh, it's a change. I mean, not to change it, but if I'm going to work with somebody and build their race machines, the contract that I set up with them nowadays is I control the machine, I bring it to the event, you know, I put it out there, I've prepped everything. Um, the sponsors are openly discussed to a point, and that's just the way it is. If you want the deal, here it is. If you don't, there it is. So I kind of understand it, and it's expensive because I'm not going to do it for free. And the machines that you want to ride, depending on the environment, cost a lot of money to build. So
So are you advocating for it or against it? Because I think you just went both ways.
I did, and I don't think a manufacturer should be doing it. I think that the aftermarket guys should be doing it.
So you don't like pro Supercross because the privateers have to race factory guys?
No, I like that because the factory teams are paying all the bills. Okay.
Okay.
Polaris isn't paying all the bills. The people are paying Polaris to do this. Okay. Jet Lawrence has got a full ride. He didn't do anything.
Well, I don't really I don't have a problem with it because I think you're splitting hairs. What's the
Okay.
diff what's the di well, and here's why. Because like
Because it's killing the aftermarket guys.
if I'm rich, no, it's not because most people can't afford this. It's not. It couldn't be further from the truth because you're talking about what, 100 people in the country that are buying into this service from Polaris or somebody else. Let's say 200 people can afford this deal. Okay, well, that's 200 super rich people that don't have to buy from the aftermarket. But most side by sides are never raced. Most ATVs are never raced.
Oh, I'm not
Most,
talking about the I'm not talking about the
but there's aftermarket.
a lot of aftermarket parts for both machines that never get built. There's a lot of people that buy
That's 200
Polaris,
people.
but there's a lot of people that buy that Polaris UTV and
Well,
never buy an aftermarket part for it.
Um, but that doesn't mean that no aftermarket parts are going on it. There's a company out there that builds cars that offers what you're talking about. It's not Polaris internally, but there's a company out there that does what you're talking about for a fee. You just hand them cash and they bring you race car and they cook for you and wipe your butt and everything else that needs done for you that day. And they're using Texera parts on a bunch of their builds. Like I know a company right now that is making money off of this bougie turnkey race program that only the rich elite can afford. And they're buying aftermarket parts to soup these cars up. So yeah, people are still making money off this. But then again, the marketing of those cars and how they do is going to affect that weekend warrior and what they buy. So, and that doesn't stop, and I don't know what classes these are in, but, if you can't afford to race at that level, don't go buy a naturally aspirated car. If you want to race a side by side, which we're here to talk about ATVs, but, you know, same thing for ATVs. Like if you're a side by side guy and you can't afford to go buy a Pro R, you can't even afford the payment, go buy yourself a used Razor XP 1000 that's in good shape. It's a competitive car. Race a class that offers very limited modifications. Build you a competitive car in that class and do it. And if you can't afford to do that because you can't, get a better job, find a different sport. Those are your options. ATV guy, if you don't have the money to build a $10,500 engine to go race a YFZ 450R in the GNC series, then go race cross country. Go find a local series. And I'm not saying cross country quads are cheaper, but you see a lot more people showing up on random bikes at a cross country race, even at the GNCC level, where it's like, oh, there's a guy on a 400EX. You know, um,
Yeah,
I don't think this isn't
I
costing the
agree.
aftermarket the money you think it is.
Well, we have a little difference of opinion, but it's okay. That's why we talk about these things is because there's always better to have two views than just one. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Right.
No, no, no. It's cool. No, yeah. Yeah,
So
opinions vary. That's how my opinion gets formed, is I listen to a lot of other people's opinions and I look at the facts. I know why you feel this way, because back in the early 2000s, the aftermarket had been carrying the sport since the late 80s. I mean, was there even a factory Honda team in 1989 when they still made the TRX 250R? I don't think there was at that point, was there?
the only guy that got support of any kind in the factories that I'm aware of was Marty Hart. And I don't know if it was 89 or 88 that it stopped.
Right. And then the aftermarket carried the sport until the early 2000s when the 450s came out, and then boom, 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 there's all these factory teams. But and like, I know that like a lot of the companies that were carrying the pro class, like, you guys and Sparks and
CT.
Insert Cup. What's that?
It was us, Sparks and CT were carrying the load for everybody for a long time.
Well,
And
then
then
you had smaller teams like Lost Creek Cycle. Well, I wouldn't say they were a smaller team, but then you had people like Lost Creek Cycles that were doing
they
it.
came in. Yeah.
There were some other privateer teams that were out there that were carrying the pro class until the factories came in and took it. Now, the factory teams might have cost you guys some money in the pro class, but there were also a lot more amateurs racing at that time that should have been resulting in more sales for the aftermarket companies. Like, yeah, the 20 pros, a bunch of them got gobbled up, but
Why
then there
didn't
were.
why didn't they go to the main companies that were carrying the industry and bring them aboard and promote them as well as they promoted their factories? They didn't. They handpicked specific people and took them. Some of them were not mainstream at that point and hurt the guys that should have been taken care of. So there's a whole lot more to it, and it could get into a more in-depth conversation. But
Yeah, I can't speak
you
on
get
that.
you get the gist. Everybody gets the gist of it. The main thing that we need to talk about is the fact that things are possibly going to change. Please get involved with your local governments and look at what's happening in your local environment for some of these regulations, so that you can make sure to uh, find out if you are going to be affected by being able to ride your ATV on federal land, because some of the restrictions may stop that. I know they're trying to kill it here in California. So just all we're trying to do is make you aware of that these things are going on out there. And I know Joe and I firmly believe similar on most things about this. We may just have a different way of expressing it. Um, and that's okay. Everybody's going to bring it across a little different. Joe, before we end here today, it is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everybody out there. The dads, we really appreciate everything that you do for the sport, getting Junior to the races, or your daughters or whoever, your friends. Thank you so much for making it happen. Um, Joe, you had a video that came out recently, and can you just briefly give us a heads up on that?
Well, you rode the Outlander. We sent you to the press intro for that. Thanks for riding. And then after that, we got our hands on one. We had Can-Am send us one, and we also had them send us well, we already had, I believe, a Gen 2 Renegade at that point from testing that we did. It was a 2024, nothing changed for 2025. Unfortunately, that's one thing we can do in ATVs is we can use last year's model often in testing and shootouts because they only change every so often. So it's unfortunate, but it's fortunate. So we did a I got with the two-time champ in Pro 4x4 NG and CC Cody Collier and his mechanic Mike Seegers, who's been mechanic of the year, owns KMK Off-Road, which makes a number of cool products for the Outlander and the Renegade. And I thought, who better than to look at the Gen 3 Outlander because we expect that the Renegade is going to go to Gen 3 at some point. Most of these machines' lives, the Outlander or the Renegade share the same engine, chassis, suspension components minus the shocks. The difference has usually been plastic, wheels, tire choice, shock choice, um, obviously no racks and stuff like that, but essentially the core of the machine is identical. So we don't expect that Can-Am is going to continue for very long to produce two different platforms. The entire Outlander lineup from the 500, 700 up to the 850 and 1000 are all new machines between 2023 and 2025. So we expect that very soon Can-Am is going to take the Renegade to that Gen 3 platform with a 101 horsepower engine, the new chassis, the A-arm suspension rear end instead of trailing arms. And I thought, man, what a cool insight to see how these things stack up and maybe what changes Can-Am should make when they bring the Gen 3 to that Renegade. And since, Cody and Mike tear these things down and totally build them from, frame up builds to get them ready for GNCC, they know what all goes into it. Who better to ride these two things back to back and even more so give them a long look over and look under the plastic and look at how things are built to see like what problems might be coming, because new platform means some problems might be solved and some new problems might crop up. So it was a longer video than I expected. It went about 35 minutes and admittedly there was a lot more talk time than we typically put in our videos. Like, yeah, we're always talking, but you're usually watching a ton of footage while it's happening. There was some a little more lengthy times here. These guys looking under the machines, going back and forth as to they'd like to see this change. They like this more. But I thought it was worth it. It felt like it was worth it because these are such high level dudes. So, and there was some interesting things, differences between the quads and not only their performance, but in what they see as new changes they're going to have to make and some changes they maybe won't have to make. They they were quite impressed, I think, overall with the Gen 3 platform. One thing, I'd say one of the biggest things that stood out was, typically the Outlander has been just as snotty in the engine department as the Renegade. And I mean that in a good way. Like, the Renegade was, well, in a good way and a bad way. The Renegade's a hard-hitting power right off idle all the way through, very responsive. The clutching is aggressive. Like there's a stall, the stall speed on the thing. Like you got to rev it up before the clutch engages. And when the clutch engages, around 1800, 2000 RPMs, that thing's like, boom. It's just like, it's there, which makes it tricky in the garage, which makes it tricky when you're putting it in the truck, when you're putting it in a trailer, makes it tricky when you're in the woods and you're working through a really technical section at low speed or you're just tired. Like the Outlander traditionally, like the Renegade, is a fatiguing machine to ride because it's so abrupt and hard hitting in the engine department, which is part of the thrill and that's part of what you buy it for. One thing that the Polaris in that category has typically done better is it was more rideable. The clutch engaged more smoothly. There was less of a bam when it came on. It was just a little more mellow. And I think on this new Outlander, even though it's 101 horsepower, they've upped the horsepower, but they've kind of mellowed out the delivery a little bit. There's not a kick when the clutch comes in like there was. It, they had their P drive roller clutch in it. Feels more like a Grizzly, and it's a little more automotive, like you feed the gas in, the engagement and the takeoff is a little more progressive. It's not like slam, boom, it's not like you're getting punched. I don't think they've softened it up to the point of the Sportsman 1000. I think it's still going to feel, if we get those two back to back, head to head, the Sportsman 1000 and the Outlander 1000, I think the Outlander is still going to feel a little punchier, a little more responsive, slightly, but they've made that machine into a machine that you will enjoy riding more all day, as opposed to the old Outlander. The longer wheelbase is going to be nice for climbs. Cody felt that, maybe not the wheelbase as much as the clutch tuning and the ECU tuning, making the engine feel just a little more tame. He felt like he couldn't bring the front end up as much as he can on the Renegade, and he was wishing he still had that for getting over obstacles, wheeling over ditches, carrying the front end off a ledge or something if he's got to drop or has to get over an obstacle. So, I think the
But
big,
can't they change that with
yep.
clutching mods and companies like B&R are going to go out there and do an ECU mod for the thing probably almost immediately if they haven't already done it.
Oh, sure. I think clutching and ECU tuning very little is going to change it now. But here's an opportunity for Can-Am. Um, Because while I'm rooting for the aftermarket, I'm not rooting for the aftermarket. These things cost $16,000. I don't want to spend $16,000 on something and have to go spend a bunch more money with the aftermarket. Sorry, aftermarket. These things are expensive. Too bad. I'm a regular guy. I'm not rich. So the opportunity for Can-Am here, and is one thing where I think they should do it, and I think that Cody and Mike would agree, is the Renegade should be tuned a little snottier from the factory. Like clutch it a little more aggressively. Maybe if they can do something with the ECU to keep it meet emission standards, but let it be just a little bit snottier. Hit just a little harder. I think that's a good thing. Um,
I'm not going to disagree with that, and especially because they have three different power modes,
right.
and that aggressive mode could be just a little bit more aggressive, but overall, you have to say that, okay, disclaimer, I am not ridden any of the other ones. I've only ridden this one. I really enjoyed it. I really did. I didn't think I would. I thought it was going to be a turd.
They made it more enjoyable. I mean,
That was a lot of fun.
the suspension compared to what it used to be on the Outlander 1000, and that's the thing, like Mike and Cody, they have access to an Outlander 1000 XTP. Like they have one in their fleet. I don't remember if it belongs, I think it belongs to the Colliers. And they said it, in the video, like, oh, Gen 2 Outlander versus Gen 3 Outlander, all new Gen 3 all day long. All day long. Like they made it very clear late in the video that between the old Outlander and the new Outlander, they like the new Outlander. Like the old Outlander used to, if you came into a set of rollers and abrupt G out, with stock suspension, especially on the Outlander, which doesn't have a separate high and low speed compression damping, it's probably not sprung quite as stiff. I can't swear to that, but that's the feeling on the trail. You could blow through that travel and you'd hear those back trailing arms go whack, when it would bottom out. That doesn't happen anymore. When you hit a little abrupt square edge G out or a log, you can see in our video, like Cody went across this little 10-inch log on the Outlander, and he hit it at an angle and the quad sideways in the air, but it was cool. I mean, he was controlled. It was intentional. It wasn't like the bike kicked him offline. So don't make any assumptions just because you're watching and you think you know everything because you may not. You know, he doesn't care if the bike gets a little sideways. And he was the way he was turning it was a natural occurrence. It wasn't like the bike did anything wrong.
Right.
But the Outlander comes off the ground, gets a little sideways, floats and lands, cushy, cushy. You see the Renegade hit it, and the back end's like boom. It comes off. And you see the back end kick like this. There's a lot of people online going, "Oh, trailing arms are better. They shouldn't have gone to A arms. They should have went to trailing arms." Like the Maverick has trailing arms, and no one's fighting for A arms on it. Yeah, well, it has 20 inches of suspension travel. It has a ton of travel. And it's a side by side. It's not an ATV. It doesn't have a rider that can move around and counteract and counterweight that thing. Now, maybe, just maybe, the old Renegade was never perfected. Like maybe in the old Outlander, maybe that unit, you know, with their at Texera did build A arms for it, but he's even said like, huh, don't want to go backwards, but should I have built a +1 trailing arm for that bike? Would that have helped it? Maybe it would have. Maybe it's something we should have looked into. Obviously, at this point, they're going to look forward to the new one, not the old
Right.
one.
Right.
So, the whole feeling has been the A arms, although some people who have Renegades and don't want to buy new ones and they want to believe what they have is the best are like, oh, trailing arms are better. Well, they kicked. Sorry, they kicked with stock shocks. They kicked with Axis shocks on Cody's bike. They didn't slam and go metal to metal like the factory shocks do. And the rebound is perhaps a bit more controlled, but same issues. Better, but same. New Outlander, that doesn't happen. That back end doesn't kick. It is much more composed in those situations, and maybe there's some situations where the trailing arms are better, but in the areas where the trailing arms seem to not perform well, the new one is clearly better, clearly better. So
Would-
a little more tuning, a little hotter tuning on the engine. And then the other thing that seemed to be a big concern, and I'm not a fan of this, is they're using a lot of single shear A-arm points. Mounts on that bike on the back and the front. And they've been doing this on Maverick X3 for a while. We just, for the side by side channel, we just put together a project. Maverick X3, we got some clutch tuning to get through on that before we take it to the dirt because we did go to 35-inch tires, new clutch kit, some other stuff. So there's a little more tuning we got to do before we can take it out for test day. But building that car was like, oh man, because they use a lot of single shear mounting points for those suspension components. And single shear is like, imagine if your YFZ or your Raptor didn't have mounting tabs, on each end of the A arms, or on if it's this long upper A arm, here's a mounting tab, here's a mounting tab. It's a shear on the front, it's on the back, and on the bottom where there's separate mounting points, you got two, they're double sheared. A lot of these mounting points on these Can-Am side by sides are single sheared, where it's like you might have, and I'm not looking at the bike, so if I say this a little wrong, you can't call me a fool because I'm admitting it right now. I'm a fool. Um, there might be a mounting point for the back of the A arm that's got a bolt in it that you're screwing through the A arm, and then the front bumper attaches to where that upper A arm mounts, and now they're using that front bumper mount as the mounting point for the upper A arm, just things like that. And then aftermarket companies come in for the side by sides and they're building all these gusset kits that bolt in that tie this hole into this hole into this hole that make a front mounting point for the upper A arm to bolt through. It's ridiculous. There's no reason for it. It weakens the structure. People are having to cobble together stuff to add strength to them, and that's one thing they saw on the Outlander they definitely did not like is single shear mounting points for major suspension components. That is not a good move, Can-Am. And Cody called him out, and I like it. He's like, there's no if they do single shear on the Renegade, there's no excuse for it. It's not correct. These are sport ATVs. They're going to be ridden hard. They're going to be pushed hard. There's no reason to do it. I agree. I don't care if it adds 10 pounds to the machine to, you know, and it wouldn't to put, double sheared mounting points for all the suspension components. They should do it. It's ridiculous that they don't. And yeah, so we kind of missed that on the first test. When we do these 1 day tests, it's hard to do all the riding they want you to do and dig into everything, especially if you don't have the old bike and the new bike together. But we know it now, and we want Can-Am to change that on the Outlander year 2 or year 3. Like we want that updated. We want that changed. Don't build these like the side by sides. We don't like it over there. We definitely don't want it over here on quads. So that was the biggest downside that I thought they seemed to have with the machine. Other than that, I think they like the rear suspension. Um, and they seem very optimistic for the new Renegade. So hopefully we see it soon, and hopefully we see it a little bit beefed up and just with a little hotter tuning than the Outlander. We have a 35-minute video on it if anybody wants to check it out. It's doing pretty well. I enjoyed making it. I think it's a good view.
Everybody check that out. Make sure you get your subscription to ATV On Demand and UTV On Demand. Dirt Wheels is also growing. So if you haven't subscribed to Dirt Wheels, you need to get that done. And ATV Talk, hey, find the subscribe button. We have multiple different shows available for you. So check that out as well. Everybody have an amazing weekend. Enjoy your Father's Day. I'm telling you this right now. My wife is already texting me. Why are you not out here? The family's ready.
Yeah,
Picture.
and you should do that. But also in the new Dirt Wheels magazine, they got an article here. Yeah, they got a three-wheeler on the cover, which we see those every now and then. And apparently, an enthusiast, I got to read this later today. That's on my to-do list. Found all the parts needed and basically built what looks like an 86 ATC 200X from the ground up, all brand new. So if you're a three-wheeler guy, that's an article I want to see, and I think a lot of other trike enthusiasts would enjoy.
I agree. I agree, Joe. As always, thank you so much for your time. And our differences aren't as big as everybody thinks they are. I think we're really close on most of it. We just, like I said, express it a little differently. Everybody have an amazing weekend. Joe, please enjoy your holiday, or I mean, the rest of your day off, and get back at it tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll go be a dog dad.
There you go. All right, brother. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Hey, you too, brother. Happy Father's Day. I'll see you.
Thank you.